Alright, so we're going to go through, this is the Wikipedia page on Chinese alchemical elixir poisoning. So I'm going to talk a bit about, I'm not just going to read this, but I'm going to talk a bit about my own experiences and the things you need to know and to clarify some of these things, because hopefully once I finish some of my work, I'll be able to do a little more work into this and to show you, maybe if you want to work along, do the experiments yourself, you can. But otherwise, isn't it a good idea to learn about the past? And the Chinese alchemical elixir scene and the poisoning of it is very interesting. There's lots of cool stuff. The Chinese really outdid themselves when it comes to alchemy and all these other things in the past. So let's go through that. Okay, so here I am on the page, and essentially it refers to, as you see, the poisoning or the toxic effects from elixirs of immortality. And it says that contain metals and minerals such as mercury and arsenic. Now, the one thing that is important to realize is that a lot of these elixirs of immortality focused around specifically metal and metallic based ingredient, or it could be ore, earthly and ore like sulfur, for example. And there are various crystals and gems and ores and whatever. That's what they were really making it out of, because these things are very powerful. It's a bit like in common culture, people didn't really believe in herbs, but they did believe in like supplements. The average person's like, oh, a herb, well, that doesn't really do anything, but they think, oh, a supplement, that's good. Of course, a lot of modern medicine is made from herbs. Even a lot of supplements are just tinctures of herbs, but minerals are fundamentally stronger. Now, what happened eventually is that they also started making them, they also made them before and after with herbs and with animal parts and everything. So essentially, how do you make an elixir of immortality from minerals, herbs, and animal parts? And we'll go through that a little more. Here, we can see they talk about, here we go, a sweetened aromatic solution of alcohol and water serving as a vehicle for the medicine. Usually, alcohol is, like a middle percentage alcohol, like could be a 20 to a 50, is used. It's the best way because it circulates it through your body. They're talking about the word elixir, a preparation of use which it was sought to change metals into gold, a drug or essence with the property of indefinitely prolonging life, etc., etc. And they talk a lot about dan, which is cinnabar, or it also means essence or elixir, vermilion. There's a couple other meanings for it, and this is important to understand this word. The important definition of dan is essence. Okay, and the essence is, if you take a bunch of herbs and you simmer them in water, just think of it like tea. What happens when you put a tea bag or some tea leaves into hot water? The water changes color to like a brown or a green or whatever the tea happens to be, right? If you really simmer it and you keep it going for like an hour, you're extracting the essence of that plant. Then you can remove the herb, the actual physical, the leaves or whatever, and you can simmer that down to a thickened, kind of like a honey or a syrup, and you can even solidify it, and this is the essence of the tea leaf or whatever, maybe a root or a branch or something that you've taken. And you can also extract the essences of minerals or animal parts, bones, organs, etc. And the essence is the essence of essentially medicine and elixirs and everything, because it's essentially, an elixir is basically an essence of something in alcohol. Pretty simple, right? So either you can take it as a pill without the alcohol, or you take it as a liquid with the alcohol. Also, cinnabar, which is the mercury sulfate, was incredibly important to these people, the Taoists and such, they thought it was better than gold, and it was very expensive. It still is very expensive, mind you. But they thought it was second to gold. I think it was cinnabar, then gold, then nephrite, jade. Probably nephrite, I believe. They were the three great ones. And Jindan, golden elixir, or the potentially could think, drinkable gold, the essence of gold. And anyone who knows their about like colloidals, as you can see here, this is a colloidal gold, which is red. It's basically microparticle or nanoparticle, I don't know, gold, and it turns a red color, and it's a drinkable, digestible gold elixir. You go concocting pills. They would smelt or refine using a danding. So here, liandan means to smelt or refine, and danding means with a tripod or a cooking vessel, basically a cauldron or a pot. Because again, you need a heating vessel. The same way they would heat minerals in these cauldrons, these tripods, these things, to get it to essentially release its essence. They were trying to process it through through all these different stages where they just heat it and heat it and heat it, and they'd oxidize, and they'd probably mix it with other things, and eventually they would get a product they would be happy with that would be much more digestible, because again, we've got to remember that metallic metal is poison. People are scared of lead or something, but iron is not so nice as well. Of course, it's not that bad, you get used to it if you've got to work around it, but the reality is, metallic metal is thought of as a poison, and there are ways to remove the poison, which is one important part of this. Here we go. Your furnace for concocting pills of immortality, and they believe that certain substances provided longevity and immortality, notably linja, which is Ganoderma or reishi mushroom. And this is called waidan, which means external elixir or external essence. While neidan, you've probably heard of that, is like qigong, internal meditation, internal essence, which works with the lower parts of the body, and the three treasures. Okay, basically the depending on how you want to think about it, but the lower part of the body, the kind of heart and the head, to form the jindan. Yes, in the dantian field, you probably know about that, the lower parts of the body. So the lower part where the elixir is stored, what you call the kidney jing, which you can figure that out for yourself if you really want to. Again, jing is also essence. So, if you want to look at that, like you think the jing of organs is the essence of that. And also pill, dan also means pill. This word dan, dan yao, pill medicine, danji, pill preparation, dan fang, etc., etc. That's another, you can just say dan if you mean like pills. Usually specifically medicinal pills. Okay, so here we start at the earliest records we have, at least in the West, but I'm sure this stuff goes back thousands of years beyond this. The earliest mention of alchemy in China occurs with the Fangshi. I think if I can find, I can't find the Fangshi or Fangshi. Master of methods, so they're kind of like old school Taoist specialists in cosmological and esoteric arts employed by the rulers of the 4th century BCE, or BC, whatever. So here we go. King has essentially been given immortality medicine. This is the same story. It's the king hires the magicians, and the magicians make the immortality medicine, because of course pretty much any person, if they become great enough, eventually starts to think, hey, wouldn't it be nice to become immortal? And the exact same way that people take a whole lot of supplements trying to extend their life and be healthier is exactly the same thing as what these people were doing back then. The only difference is that we have a disfigured, inharmonic chemistry while they had much more of a harmonic alchemy, which is a bit more of an old world science, a bit like old world buildings compared to new world buildings. Yes, they all work, they all serve their purpose, but you know, one of them looks a little bit nicer, I'll put. The Book of Han says around 133 BC that the Feng Shi Li Xiaojun said Emperor Wu sacrificed to the stove, basically meaning heating, and you will be able to summon things, spirits. Summon spirits and you'll be able to change cinnabar powder into gold powder. That's very interesting. So to kind of analyze this, sacrifice to the stove. So throwing into fire, potentially, a bit like salt into fire, and you can summon things, spirits, different colors. Assumingly, that's kind of what they mean. Summon spirits and you'll be able to change cinnabar powder into gold. I'm currently editing this video and listening to that, it sounds pretty obvious. Alright, so sacrifice to the stove and you'll be able to summon things. So, you know, put cinnabar in some kind of vessel and heat it, right? Summon spirits and you'll be able to change cinnabar powder into yellow gold. So, summon spirits, you know, what does that mean? You're heating something to the point that it smokes. Assumingly, this is the point that it, you know, vaporizes. Summon spirits, you know, it sounds pretty obvious. That's just they were using very flowery, interesting language to describe this. How do you make gold from sublimating cinnabar? I don't really know. So does that mean heat it? Maybe heat it a certain way? With this yellow gold, you may make vessels to eat and drink out of. You will then increase your lifespan. Having increased your lifespan, you'll be able to see the Shan of Penglai in the midst of heaven. Now, Shan it means a mortal, like an upper realm, immortal of Penglai. I think that's like the realm in the sky, or maybe the northern realm or something, I don't know. Then you may perform the sacrifices Feng and Shan and escape death. I'm not sure what these ones mean. You have to look them up if you want. Okay, so here's another one. Wei Boyang, the Kantong Chi, which is the Book of Changes, which is what we actually call the, supposedly the I Ching, which if you read the I Ching, we've all read the I Ching, but it's kind of some basic bitch, like, you know, stuff. But the Joyi Kantong Chi, excuse my mispronunciation, the C in Chinese is like a S, so it's actually a Santong, I think. If you look that up, which, you know, if you need a link to it, just tell me. Good luck translating it, of course. It's pretty heavy. It's like if you've read the Baopazi, again, if you need a link, there's this cool website, I think it's called ctext.com, I forget, and you can find all these Chinese texts, and it goes deep into internal and external alchemy. Maybe they just didn't translate those chapters because they thought people would think they were weird, or maybe they didn't really understand them, so that's why it's not in the I Ching. You know, it's not talking about like mixing mercury and lead and all that shit. I don't know. Maybe they wanted to keep it a secret as well, but supposedly the Zhouyi Kantong Chi is the I Ching, or the Book of Changes. Going on, it listed mercury and lead as the prime ingredients for elixirs, which limited later potential experiments and resulted in numerous cases of poisoning. It's quite possible that many of the most brilliant and creative alchemists fell victim to their own experiments by taking dangerous elixirs. Now, one hypothetical idea is that the idea of mercury and lead, which again in the Vedic tradition they've said mercury and lead basma, which is their kind of like mineral powder that they make by like heating it and adding a bunch of things and all that, is basically what the sages will take to become wise and immortal and all this stuff. So I don't want to devalue the actual use of mercury and lead for these elixirs, because it actually, you can fundamentally use them. I've used them and they do work if you know what you're doing, allegedly. That was all alleged. But also there's the idea that the mercury and lead is the shit and the piss in the body, excuse my language. Yes, worst time for someone to walk in. These are the lower areas of the Dantian, essentially, which they would use. So they would essentially meditate on these areas. and they would try to combine them together and use them as the resources for the Neidan. And because it was said this book was written in a intangible way for humans to read, or that they wouldn't understand it. So is it an allegory or isn't it? I actually don't know. Anyway, let's get on with this. When the alchemy was complete, he said, although the gold elixir is now accomplished, we ought first to test it by feeding it to a white dog. If the dog can fly after taking it, then it's edible for man. If the dog dies, then it is not. The dog fell over and died, but Wei and his disciple Yu took the medicine and immediately died, after which the two cautious disciples fled. Wei and Yu later revived, rejoicing their faith, took more of the elixir and became immortals. Here we go. Elixir ingestion is first mentioned in the 81 BC discourses on salt and iron. And you'll find there's a lot of these books throughout history which describe just various things like cosmology, governance, the science of the time, social phenomena, and you can go through those and you'll have to translate them, or else you'll have to pay like scholarly websites to find certain translations, and the translations are probably not that good. Here we go. During the 6 dynasties, these dates here, something called cold fruit powder. Now, if you haven't read the page on cold fruit powder, I recommend you do it, because it will give you a firm idea on a lot of this stuff. Of course, I will read that in another video, just because I think it's an incredibly important one. But anyway, here it says, Taoist alchemists began recording the often fatal side effects of elixirs in an unusual case of involuntary elixir poisoning, and Empress Jia Fang was forced to commit suicide by drinking Jinshao Jiao, which means gold you liquid. Oh, here we go. Wine with gold fragments. That's interesting, because the if you look up in like Prague, there's some in one of the alchemical hideouts where they used to make the medicines for people. They had this same stuff here. They had a bottle of gold, of alcohol essentially, with gold in it. So I think this is a poisoning through an excess, which you're going to find that one of the first poisonings of this stuff is through an excess of this stuff. For example, cold fruit powder was, I think, used by Taoists in a very small amount for their training. Otherwise, it was sometimes used by just regular people or kings and princes and such, and they would basically use it as a drug, and they would be very sick from it because they used too much. So the Balpas are, here we go, yeah, this one written by Gehong, which is an important book if you ever want to check that one out. Lists 56 chemical preparations and elixirs, 8 of which were poisonous, with visions from mercury poisoning the most commonly reported symptom. Emperor Ai of Jin died at the age of 25 as a result of his desire to avoid growing old. The Book of Jin says the emperor practiced bigu. Now, bigu, it says translated roughly as grain avoidance, but it's debated whether it was fasting in general. By that I mean the avoidance of any kind of food, or if it was just grain, as in sugar and grain avoidance. Because some people would still take, various elixirs and herbs and minerals and such in order to keep themselves going. And they would do it to, that's like another good read one, to expel the three corpses, basically the parasites in the body. Tao Hongjing describes taking a white powder. When you've taken a spatula of it, you will feel an intense pain in your heart as if you've been stabbed there with a knife. After 3 days, you will want to drink, and when you have drunk a full hu, about 50 liters, your breath will cut off. When that happens, it will mean that you are dead. When your body has been laid out, it will suddenly disappear and only your clothing will remain. Thus, you will be an immortal released in broad daylight by means of his waistband. If one knows the name of the drug, perhaps the secret name of the ingredients, he will not feel the pain of his heart, but after he has drunk a full hoot, he will still die. When he is dead, he will become aware that he has left his corpse below him on the ground. At the proper time, jade youths and maidens will come with an azure courage to take it away. If one wishes to linger on in the world, he should strictly regulate his drinking during the 3 days when he feels the pain in his heart. This formula may be used by the whole family. So some of these elixirs, the purpose was to kill a person actually, because apparently there's different forms of immortals and they would want to become like a ghost. So if you take all of these certain ingredients, it'd kind of like supercharge your soul, I guess, and then they become a ghost. So some people had the intention of becoming physically immortal, and others had the intention of becoming spiritually immortal, which is a bit peculiar. After Tao had learned the secret art of making elixirs, he was worried about the shortage of materials. So the Emperor supplied him with gold, cinnabar, copper, sulfate, realgar, and so forth. When the process was accomplished, the elixir had the appearance of frost and snow and really did make the body feel lighter. The Emperor took an elixir, frost and snow, so it has like salt maybe. The Emperor took an elixir and found it effective. Tao spent his last years working on different elixirs and presented 3 to the Emperor, who had refused immortality drugs from Geng Yu, who claimed to have lived 30 years without food, only consuming pieces of mica in stream water. Eating of mica, which is like a foily plate-like, sheet-like mineral, is talked about a lot. Supposedly they say if you heat, like you cook the mica, you kind of oven it, or something like that, and you eat it, you basically either become immortal or live a really long life. Or I don't really know why. It's like an aluminum silicate something rather mineral, but also it's very apparently it's electrically conductive. The pyramids were supposedly coated in mica before they got ransacked, so there's probably some phenomena with it. Here's a poisoning. The medicine made him very irritable, losing all normal self-control in joy or anger. Finally, when his illness took a turn for the worst, he could not speak for 10 days at a time, and others requested audiences with the Emperor, but refused and subsequently died in 1846. The Emperor received a wine tincture of ivy, helix. Apparently it could turn white hair black and provide longevity. But the Emperor heard people died a violent death after drinking ivy tincture. He stopped. Zhang was publicly shamed, and the Emperor granted his request to search in the mountains for the right plant, but never appeared again. So a lot of these could be just people who, at the end of the day, the Taoists had to experiment. They had to learn their craft. So if they had a rich king to pay them, they'd probably just practice around. But ivy, I think there is effects in ivy. You definitely could refine it into something. Of course, you got to be careful. Here we go. Medical officer Li Xianbo present the Emperor Shangzong cinnabar, which had been heated and subdued by fire in order to gain favor from him. Thus, the ulcerous disease the Emperor was all attributes to his crime. You'll find a lot of these emperors will eat cinnabar like crazy, and then they will get sick because they eat it every day, and their bodies, they'll find like cinnabars in these boils and ulcers and all this kind of stuff. So again, the excess consumption, also the consumption of physical things, you gotta be careful about that, processing it, etc. This great period yet essentials of Elixir Manual for Oral Transmission recommends 14 elixir formulas he found successful, most of which seem poisons containing mercury and lead, if not arsenic, as ingredients. These 3 are very popular ingredients for all these elixirs because they are very powerful. Here we go. This one, Supplements of 1,000 Golden Remedies, categorically states that mercury, realgar, orpiment, sulfur, gold, silver, and vitriol are poisonous, but prescribes them in larger amounts for elixirs than for medicines. In contrast to drinking soluble arsenic in groundwater, when powdered arsenic is eaten, astonishing degrees of tolerance can be achieved, and Sun Simiao might have thought that when human beings reached a level approaching that of the immortals, their body would no longer be susceptible to poisons. Case where people died eating elixirs made of cinnabar, mercury, lead, and silver. Case where people suffered boils in the head and sores in the back by ingesting cinnabar prepared by roasting together mercury and sulfur. And cases where people became seriously ill through drinking melted liquid lead. Oh my goodness. So you've got to kind of look at this and see that there are a lot of bad alchemists. The same way that we have that doctors are the third leading cause of death. I believe in America, in the past, some of these Taoists and alchemists didn't exactly test their own stuff. And they probably didn't know how to prescribe properly, and they didn't know how to refine properly, etc., causing some issues. Now, of course, this is a page specifically about the issues. This isn't a page talking about all the people that became immortal and have accounts of them flying and turning invisible and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It's about elixir poisoning. It's one thing to keep in mind, so don't be pessimistic. Here we go. This one's when they're talking about herbs. So take 5 ounces of Indian gooseberry, wild raspberry, doda, 5 flavor berry and broadleaf plantain, and pound them into flour. Mix it with boxthorn juice and false daisy juice and dry. Heat almonds and good wine in a silver vessel and add foxglove, tofu, and deer glue, probably made from the deer horn. Combine this with 5 herbs and dry it into small pills. The usual dosage is 30 pills a day. That's a lot. Taken with wine, but one should avoid eating pork, garlic, mustard, and turnips when taking this medicine. That would be to avoid the medicine going into the kidneys. For the mustard, I'm not sure. The turnips, I'm also not sure. But pork and garlic is to avoid that, probably. So you can see here, this is a basic herbal remedy. It's pretty simple. Only the other things is a silver vessel. These things are all to get it to form together. Foxglove, tofu, and deer glue. So you can see, of course, the taking of herbs, especially when you mix them right, can be quite beneficial. Now, this is a very important part. During the Tang Dynasty, Chinese alchemists divided into 2 schools of thought about elixir poisoning. The first, although altogether ignored the poison danger and considered the unpleasant symptoms after taking an elixir as a sign of its efficacy. Here we go, describe the side effects and recommended methods of bringing relief. After taking an elixir, if your face and body itch as though insects were crawling over them, if your hands and feet swell dropsically, if you cannot stand the smell of food and bring it up after you've eaten, if you feel as though you were going to be sick most of the time, if you experience weakness in the 4 limbs, if you have to go often to the latrine, which means the bathroom, or if your head or stomach are violently ache, do not be alarmed or disturbed. All these effects are merely proofs that the elixir you are taking successfully dispelling your latent disorders. Now, this is an interesting one. You have to work it out for yourself, to be honest. Is the effects, all these horrible effects, some kind of detoxification effect, or a sign that it's working? Some people believe so. I think it's to an extent, yes, though ideally we want to make preparations and medicines and elixirs that don't do these horrible things. Of course, you take a medicine that is meant to, release the bowels, and you take too much of it and you're going to have a horrible time, no matter what. It's just kind of like that. Or something that makes you, piss a lot. It's going, you take too much of it and it's just going to be like that. But I found, because I tried, copper, electrolyzed in magnesium sulfate, the powder from that, and I tried probably about 2/3 of a pill, so a very small amount, and I was violently sick throughout the entire night and morning, and I'm talking really sick. It was awful, and I had all of these effects. Could not eat, felt sick, going to the toilet, weakness in the body, the head and stomach is horrible, is feeling horrible. all of these things, you know, the feeling of insects. I've had that before with other things, and all I could think about was, oh man, I fucked up. I really fucked up. And I don't usually get that with most, you know, I try out a lot of weird things, a lot of different things, even a lot of mineral things, and I don't usually get that. That was the first time that's really happened. I've had that from like a herbal, like some, you know, a certain herb before. But here's the thing, the next day or after this was done, I did feel a lot better. I did. It's like I leveled up, and maybe it was just because I went through such hell that, you know, you just kind of feel better after that. But I think if anything, it worked, and it worked too well, and potentially also because of the form it was in, that kind of chalky alkaline form, it just wasn't very good. You know, it was too heavy on the stomach. So I think it was too heavy on the stomach, but it showed that it did work. It showed that it did have some effect, right? It's just that it was too much, not in the right form. So there are all these factors that you can modulate and change, and you will have to learn in order to create something that is not poisonous, that is not damaging, that is not, you know, does not make you feel horrible, but instead is, you know, is medicinal and healthy and good and all this kind of stuff. So learn from the experiences of these people and me. Many of these symptoms are characteristics of metallic poisoning. Formication, which means a sensation of insects. Edema, which is like swelling. Weakness of extremities, later leading to infected boils and ulcers. Nausea, vomiting, gastric and abdominal pain, diarrhea and headaches. For relieving the side effects, the elixir, this guy recommends one should take hot and cold baths, drink a mixture of scallion, soy sauce and wine. If that does not bring relief, then one should boil a hornet's nest, spurge, Solomon seal, and ephedra would definitely work, into a medicine, take 1 dose. That's what they make cold and flu medicine out, this plant here. It's very hard to get a hold of because it's made used for certain other things, which is not legal, so too bad about that. Here we go. The second school of alchemists admitted that some metals and mineral elixirs elixir constituents were poisonous, and tried to either neutralize them or to replace them with less dangerous herbal substances. So here we go. This one emphasizes the poisonous nature of gold, silver, lead, mercury, arsenic, and describes witnessing many premature cases of death brought about by consumption of cinnabar. Jung believes, however, that poisons could be rendered harmless by properly choosing, combining adjunctivants, so things which, you know, kind of affect the thing, and combine and complementary ingredients. For example, gold should always be used together with mercury, while silver can only be used when combined with gold, copper carbonate, and real gar for the preparation of the Jindan golden elixir. So there you go. What you combine it with, how you prepare the ingredient, because if you want to look at modern supplements, chemistry, used to be that you would take supplements and it would be like copper sulfate. Did they do sulfate? I don't know. Copper carbonate, copper oxides, and sulfates, and all these simple things. And they're not great. They kind of, you can kind of use them, but they would cause issues. And then eventually, and sometimes actually they just have pure metal, which is not very good. Then they switched into, like I've got one here, 1 second. All right, magnesium aspartate. Now, aspartate is a amino acid, right? And then zinc monomethanone. So they mix these in with amino acids, and this is something called, what's it called? It's basically to make something organic, to make it into like a edible form, because you think a plant takes these mineral powders and such, and it absorbs it, and then it creates it into a plant mineral form, right? Which is edible by animals. That's the basic idea of making something more digestible, and chelating, it's called chelating. This is basically the chemistry idea of making metal digestible. Is you chelate it, right? You change it to chemical state. But even some of these chelated ones with the amino acids and stuff, again, chemistry isn't always, modern pharmacology isn't always making things the most safe. Some of those can still give you a gut ache. A lot of pills will still give you a gut ache. You're gonna have to figure that one out. They talk about saltpeter and vinegar to render elixirs harmless, or chaste tree roots, which is Vitex. Gotta be kind of careful with that herb. Another method for removing the poison of mercury is putting it in 3-year-old wine, add sal ammoniac and boil it for 100 days. So the use of sal ammoniac, saltpeter and vinegar are very common things in all forms of alchemy, you'll see. Again, the idea of ulcers developing, where here doctors discovered cinnabar powder had accumulated in his pus and blood. Anyone who had some, here we go, the second Share Renbo, this guy heard of anyone who had some cinnabar subdued by fire, which I think they mean like heated in fire. He went after it, caring about nothing about the disturbance, and his only fear was that he would not have enough. So essentially he's a mineral drug addict, because when you have mineral powder accumulating in your pus and your blood, or in this boil or whatever it was, an ulcer, yeah, that's a bit fucked up. That just shows how much these people take. They were probably eating like spoonfuls by the day, like cupfuls maybe. That's how much they were just they were eating more rocks than bread or rice. And he died. This person here, this scientist and statesman in the dream pool essays, that's a cool word, dream pool essays, suggests that mercury compounds might actually be medicinally valuable and needed for study. Yes, mercury is used in lots and lots of medicines. That's a whole rabbit hole you can go through, and it still is used today. They kind of phase it out a bit, but it is used in many things. Now, just because it is used in medicines for adults does not mean that it should ever be used for, say, a baby or anything like that. Ironically enough, now cinnabar is an extremely good drug and be taken even by a newborn baby. Probably not, no. Anyway, this one says, but once it has been changed by heat, it can kill an adult person. Supposedly, so cinnabar can be changed into a deadly poison. Why should it not be changed into something of extreme benefit? Since it can change into something which kills, there is a good reason to believe that it may have the patent principle of saving life. So it's the old idea that anything that can kill you can save you, essentially, and that's very true. You got to think that what exactly is the effect of, say, a poison or something? Like, does it make you feel hot? Does it make you feel cold? Does it make you feel tired? Does it make you feel like bugs are crawling on you or something like that? This, if you just say you had 10% of that effect, maybe you could use it for an extreme, like a something to warm you, for example. So that's how this stuff works. This one, the Compendium of Materia Medica, discusses a historical tradition of producing gold and cinnabar elixirs and concludes the alchemist will never realize that the human body, which thrives on water and the cereals, is unable to sustain such heavy substances as gold and other minerals within the stomach and intestines for any length of time. How blind it is in the pursuit of longevity to lose one's life instead. Yes, how ironic. Essentially, metallic metal is not the best thing to be having in your guts unless it is of a nanoparticle state, which means it's really, really, really small to the point where you can pretty much absorb it. And there are these different factors: the solubility of the thing, the size of it, the state of it, etc. These all help you to make something that's either poisonous or medicinal. They talk about in Rasashatra, basically Ayurvedic medicine, the practice of adding metals and minerals to herbal medicines. There's a tradition that uses mercury in cinnabar for lengthening lifespan. If you know anything about Ayurveda, they love cinnabar and mercury. They love that so much, and they use it for lots and lots and lots of their medicines. Here we go. Rasesvara, excuse me if I butchered that, is a tradition that advocates the use of mercury to make the body immortal, and samskara is a process said to detoxify heavy metals and toxic herbs. Correct. They go through long processes to detoxify the mercury. If you look at the detoxification processes of Ayurveda, it's good to study, because it will, it's good to practice and study those, a couple of them. A lot of them use things like ginger and turmeric and vinegar and milk and other things, and they figured out how to detoxify things. Based upon early Chinese descriptions of elixir poisoning, they decisively demonstrated a close correspondence with the known medicinal symptoms of mercury poisoning, lead poisoning, and arsenic poisoning. Now, one fascinating thing to think about is why are they not talking about copper poisoning? As I said, when I took that copper, I got fucked up by it. Why aren't they talking about iron poisoning? Iron and copper are much more common than lead and mercury and arsenic. These are very rare and expensive. Well, lead isn't, but arsenic is not really as well. But, mercury is very rare and expensive. Why are they not talking about tin and aluminum? Well, aluminum they didn't have, at least not in metal form back then. They had it in ore form. That's a fascinating thing to think about. And I guess the reason is because we've culturally decided that mercury, lead, and arsenic are no good in the West, that you're not allowed to have these things. They are bad. But we have not, with copper, you're allowed to have copper. Copper's, it's good for you. It's good to wear necklaces of copper and all that kind of stuff. And even to take a copper supplement, of course, too much is not so good, because apparently it can... Was it leach out your zinc or something? I don't know. Very irritable, losing all normal self-control, in joy or anger. He could not speak for 10 days at a time. Not being able to speak is like a mercury issue, I think, with the distinctive psychological effects of mercury poisoning. There you go. Progressing from a abnormal irritability to idiotic, melancholic, or manic conditions. So again, they are taking too much of these things and in the wrong form, and maybe the wrong substances. Who knows? You can see the statistics. The statistical age and the death age of these emperors was 41.3, and 66.4% were natural causes. Nearly 30% were homicides, so they were basically being killed. 3.3 is drug toxicity, so only 3.3% of deaths of Chinese emperors was due to drug toxicity. Of course, we don't know how, maybe some of these medicines may have caused them to die earlier or later, or, and then 2% suicide. And one important thing to realize is that here we go, 93% of emperors studied were overindulgent. Let me repeat that, 93.2% of these emperors studied were overindulgent in drinking alcohol, sexual activity, or both. So, one important thing is to realize that a lot of the time, the Taoists were the only ones taking these things. Because the Taoists would meditate and exercise and learn to circulate their energy. And if an average person eats an elixir made of mercury or lead or arsenic or even copper, or even they take too much ginseng, their heart starts pumping and they're like, oh shit, am I dying? And they're freaking out. Taoists realizes, oh, look at all this energy. Maybe it's a little too much for me at this point, but it's a lot of energy, and they kind of realize how to circulate it. Here we go. The Chinese believe that arsenic sulfide, realgar, and orpiment, which, orpiment and realgar are arsenic sulfides, frequently used in immortality elixirs, had aphrodisiac effects. Yes, they do. where they stimulate fertility, and they said sulfur and cinnabar elixirs increased longevity, averted hunger, and lightened the body. Now, one interesting thing, and you can test this yourself by taking a relatively safe substance, which is nephrite jade, and it's a bit of a pain in the ass to grind it up, but if you can manage to grind up nephrite jade and eat it, and someone had the exact same experience when they ate gold, which I forgot how they processed, but they did process it and powderize it and eat it. And essentially the thing you will feel is that you're no longer hungry, you no longer are affected by the temperature, you don't really get cold or hot, you don't really get tired, you don't really lack attention. You're put into kind of what I think of as like an immortal state. And they talk about lightening the body. I've never really had that, but yeah, they do talk a lot about lightening the body, which I think it means, when you feel heavy and tired, and it takes that away. Yeah, so some elixirs included hallucinogenic drugs, that 5 cold food powder, or 5 mineral powder, which we talked about in the start, can be that. Now, this is an interesting part, the incorruptibility. Firstly, we have the jade burial suit, which basically, if they put a body in a suit of jade, it doesn't really rot. This, I don't want to click on that because it's a bit, you can go click on it yourself. But Shinjoi, let's see, if we look at her, she is a very pretty lady. Shinjoi, Lady Dai or Marquis Dai. So looks like she's kind of northern Mawangdui, Changhua, Hunan province. Where's Hunan? It's maybe northwest. No, I'm completely wrong. Okay, she's eastern, kind of centrally, or whatever. Right. I guess people just had better genetics back then, so everyone had a good jaw and a good shaped stuff. Anyway, she is essentially, her body didn't rot. Which is, again, if you want to see the picture, it's not a very nice looking picture, but she didn't rot. And it says, when gold and jade are inserted into the 9 orifices, corpses do not decay. When salt and brine are absorbed into flesh and marrow, dried meats do not spoil. And Shunjay, normally high levels of mercury and lead in her internal organs. So again, she had heavy metal poisoning, which essentially heavy metal poisoning, this is very important to understand this, is when you have too much heavy metal in your body, meaning prolonged heavy exposure to this. So every day, if you eat some kind of lead, and specifically a lead that is not chelated, because again, if the lead is chelated, it is more water soluble. If it is a lead salt, which I don't recommend you just go chomping on lead salts, let's put it this way, it's going to pass through the body, because what happens when you mix water and salt? It is water soluble. It's still going to affect you very heavily, of course, if you take a small amount of it, whatever, but if you take a lot of it, it'll hurt you. But if you take just like lead powder, it's going to absorb and get into your organs, and you're going to have little bits of shards of lead everywhere, essentially. Of course, if you eat like lead salt, like you eat bread or rice, you're going to have, your body's going to take that on, and you're going to store it in your fat and organs and all this stuff. And eventually, once you have too much in you, it's called heavy metal poisoning. So that's important to realize what that is. And then people release the heavy metals by simply allowing the body to, just purge it or get away from the metal or whatever. So usually if you look into lead, which I had a video talking about how I think lead's actually not that bad, it's just that children were overexposed to lead in, nearly 100, maybe 80 years ago, right? And then they banned it because children were having issues, like it was giving them intellectual disorders and physical disorders because they were taking in too much through the lead. Probably lead paint and toys, all of the lead and the gasoline, just breathing it in constantly. I'm not sure really, how they absorbed it all, but yeah, and then they banned it because of that. But again, as I said, what if it was copper? What if it was iron or copper used? You get poisoned off iron or copper, you touch a lot of rust, you feel that heat, that hot sensation in your hand. Yeah, that's iron poisoning. That's a very mild form of iron poisoning. What if it was iron gasoline? Or what if it was iron paint in the toys? Of course, we use iron for like all of our structures, so I don't think they're really going to make it illegal. Can you imagine if the iron was illegal and we used lead for everything instead? Or we used like copper for our structures? That'd be crazy. I think we need to use more copper in our world. It's nice and flexible. Anyway, they talk about temporary death by taking an elixir and then they revive and become immortal. And then we have the Balpazers talking about the 5 mineral base again. We're probably going to have to make a video on this one. This is a good name. 5 mineral based multicolored 9-fold radiance elixir. And the reason it's called 9-fold radiance elixir is that it's also made out of, I think, realgar, cinnabar, sulfur, some kind of lead mineral, and I think a copper mineral. I forget. You can look it up yourself if you read through this page. And it's called 9-fold radiance because they would heat it in, I don't know, like earthen vessels or something. And apparently, each ingredient individually, a couple pounds of it, I think, or a pound of it, and it would go through all of these colors. It would go through 9 different colors, supposedly. And once it had gone through its 9th color, you'd be good to go, and you'd mix them all together. There we go, the blue elixir, and you would feed 1 teaspoon or bathe the person in it, and it was apparently like super yang, and someone would revive. Yeah, I mean, look, shit, if you're gonna revive a person, that's your best bet. Maybe you can hook up some kind of electromagnetic technology, or use some EMF device to like blast someone's brain with radiation, and you can probably bring them back to life with that. But I mean, if you want to go through a chemical way, that's kind of your bet. And finally it says, a Tang Taoist text prescribes taking an elixir in doses half the size of a millet grain, but adds, if one is sincerely determined. Now, millet grain is tiny. This is smaller than a pea. This is like a quarter of a pea. It's like half a rice grain, really. Even smaller. I think a millet grain is like a third or a fourth of a rice grain. If one is sincerely determined and dares to take a whole spatula, and a spatula, I mean like a little one, spatula full at once, one will temporarily die, I guess as the body processes it, and half a day or so, and then be restored to life like someone waking from sleep. However, this is perilous in the extreme. Yeah, I don't really recommend that. Not so good. And they talk about that some people apparently were trying to die. At least these people, the Shangqing school, alchemy, and the Maoshan revelations, and in the life of Tao Hongjing. Yeah, basically they said that they were trying to do that intentionally. It's really just someone arguing that. Whether they really were, I don't know. I don't think maybe some of them were. Who knows? So anyway, hopefully we'll get off that. Hopefully this has been of interest. You see this guy putting it into the tripod, basically cooking it in the pot. You've got a nice little lid, and probably closing it off, who knows, and he's cooking up his nice elixir. Probably sublimating it, maybe, or whatever. I don't know what he's got in there. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that. A nice little hour of information. Of course, check the links in the description, and have a nice day. Goodbye.